Welcome to How to Cold Email and DM Your Dream podcast guest. So this is a pre-recorded version for all the people that have missed out on the session or are not part of the Feeler community and still want a chance at learning what I have shared and want to see all the insights and all the stuff that I've shared over and learned over the last 2 years of podcasting and sending cold emails and DMs to guests. So now a bit on my background. So I'm a recent graduate of American University in Washington, D.C. I'm the podcast host of Business Podcast Baruhi and the co-host of Deep Dive into VC. My cold emails have landed responses from people like Neil Patel, David Shine, Gary Vee's PR team, and so many more. Now the agenda. So this is where I'll be doing a rundown of everything I'll be covering from start to finish. So the first thing I'll be covering is tips and real examples of DMs and follow-ups, how to craft a cold email, the various follow-ups I've used, some tips on cold emailing and DMing, how to find your dream guests and reach out to them. Now, without further ado, the DMs and follow-ups that worked. So the original DM. So in this original DM, you can see I have first included the guest name. Then I've included the ask. Then next, I've included the proof of past guests, and this has been a bit personalized according to the industry of the guest. So, for example, if you're trying to interview a creator, you would try and list all the creators that you've interviewed in the past. Whereas, say, if you're trying to interview a VC, you would probably want to include all the names of all the VCs that you've interviewed in the past, and then having a decent call to action. So in this case, for me, I think mine was a bit ambiguous. So I would definitely work on improving it so that it's more clear and to the point, so having a specific date and time. Now, next, I'll be sharing some of the DMs and follow-ups that work. So this is a simple follow-up that I've used, and I've learned this from Danny Miranda, actually. And he says, don't mean to be annoying, just persistent, would still love to have you on the podcast. So Danny is actually an amazing, underrated podcaster that I had the pleasure of interviewing on my podcast. And from him, I'm learning a lot about DMing and about cold emailing. And so do check out his newsletter in the DMs. It's a paid newsletter, but it's definitely worth the money. And so the next thing is the response from Beezer. So the very next day, basically, I got a response back saying that she's overcommitted and appreciates the offer. So next, I'll be talking about another cold email that worked, and this is the one that I sent to Team Beer Biceps. So the first thing I've got in this breakdown is the guest name and the team. Then who am I is very short and succinct. Why am I reaching out? And secondly, fourthly, I've got the ask. So what am I asking them to do, and what is the point of me to reach out to them? Then fifth, I've got the call to action, and sixth, I've got pleasantry and regards. Now, it took me about 7 to 8 follow-ups to eventually get a response back from the team, and this is also something I learned from Danny Miranda, just looking at how he positions himself and comes across to guests. And I've learned from him, and I've implemented that learning into my follow-up. So this is the response I got back from Perul, someone at Team Beer Biceps, asking if they can have a link so that they can do reference checking. Now, this is the cold email that worked on Gary Vee's PR team. And the full credits for this specific template go to Jonathan Barshop, who handles all the bookings of My First Million podcast. And he's an extremely creative genius when it comes to cold emailing. So this is the one that I sent to Gary Vee's PR team, and I eventually got a response back saying that he appreciates the offer, something along those lines, but will have to pass on the opportunity. And so these are examples of some of the follow-ups I've used. Don't mean to be annoying, just persistent, but still love to have you in the podcast. And this is the one that I sent to Team Beer Biceps. Now, some cold email and DM tips. So my first thing is to personalize a line or ask. And how you can personalize this is by making a direct connection to them. So say, for example, they have a dog, or say, for example, they went to a specific university. So you mention that in your first line, or you mention an article, a book that you've read that they have written. and you say your key takeaways or what you loved about learning about the journey, or any insights that you can add that show that this person has done a bit of research, they know what the heck they're talking about. And then lastly, I would say where you heard of them. So for example, for me, when before interviewing David Shine, I had no idea who this guy was. I just heard about him from the Sachin and Adam show, which is, by the way, shout out to them, an amazing podcast done by Sachin Shah and Adam Miller. And they have an amazing podcast where they go undercover and they talk to Australian VCs, and they just cover the entire ecosystem, and it's been amazing learning from them and learning from the guests. So my next one is to have a decent call to action. So something like, can we schedule a time for you to join me on the podcast after X date? Now I would say, to make it short, clear, and crisp, avoid being long-winded. So as you could see from my DMs, you could see that it was just a paragraph. It wasn't too long. It wasn't an essay. And next, I would say, leave your ego at the door, and you have to follow up persistently on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. So recently, my cold emails have gotten responses from people like Corey Levy, Team Beer Biceps, and Brad Feld. Now, what not to do? So do not make it long-winded. Do not use a spray and paint approach and send it everywhere without personalizing anything. Make it more about you than the guest. So keep everything about you to a brief. Now, lastly, the last segment, and this is the more interesting one, maybe perhaps for you, is to how do you find your dream guest? Now, you look for people you're already following and you have familiarity with. That's my first suggestion, my top suggestion for you. And for me, that happened to be Eric Ban. I'd been following him for a while, so I had a gist of like what all he was talking and what all he brought to the table. And so that's what I pitched him exactly. And we had an amazing conversation, a really lovely conversation. I really enjoyed talking to him, learning from him, and it was an absolute masterclass in fundraising. So do check it out on any of the streaming platforms like Anchor, Spotify. It's already out. And yeah, then I would say look at other podcasts and see what their guests are. I think this is an underrated tactic, and I've definitely used this quite a fair bit in terms of my outreach. And then I would suggest to use the following methods to find the email addresses. So there's Rocket Reach over here, and this Clearbit Connect. So the differentiation between the two is that the Clearbit has about 100 free credits a month, whereas the Rocket Reach has about only, I think, 5 credits a month. So it's quite a significant difference between the two. And so next, I'll be sharing how to find the email addresses as well again, and you can find those from the PR team email from their website and the Instagram contact details. So thank you so much for listening, and that's it. And if you have any questions, do DM me on Twitter. My handle is @kaziruhi, and or you can email me as well at bizpodruhi@gmail.com. And so before we end this, I just wanted to share some key takeaways, which I think are really crucial for anyone, any podcaster, and basically anyone that wants to do cold email outreach. And that is to make it not about you, but make it about them, to personalize your ask, and to have a good call to action. So these are my 3 main tips, and hope you enjoyed this